Greetings everyone, and welcome to another feature of Eavesdropping on the Elders. I know, it's been a while since we did a new show, but that's okay, because the show we're going to do today will make up for all of that time that we've been away. Of course, it's been the summer, and we've had a lot to do, but we're back today with an excellent show. Like to give thanks to God, of course, for the opportunity for me to be able to do this, to bring this information to you. Give thanks to our elders here in the city of Cincinnati as well, and to Jim Alexander, Conscious Media Productions, for exposing me to this medium and allowing me to be able to bring these shows to you. And we are encouraged by all of the calls and emails and contacts that we make from you about this show, Eavesdropping on the Elders. Of course, the last one we did with Lois Wilson got a lot of rave reviews. Got a lot of calls from some older folks here in the community who used to bowl and knew Lois way back in the 50s. And of course, prior to Lois, we did Emily Spicer. A lot of you know her from the Board of Education and Woodward High School. And then we did Dr. Herbert Smitherman. And today's guest is an icon in Cincinnati. And I'm not going to take any more time to go through any kind of preliminaries. The icon that we're going to interview today is Cleaster Mims. And that's all I need to say, right? When you hear her name, you think about education. If you know anything about Cincinnati, when you hear the name Cleaster Mims, you think about education. And we are so proud and honored and pleased that she has agreed to come and allow us to eavesdrop on her today. Welcome, Cleaster.
Thank you.
I appreciate this time, this opportunity to just sit here and talk to you about your life. And that's what we want to do. Just want to talk to you about your life. And we know a lot of things that you've done in education. I want you to talk about that. But I think a good place to start for those who may not know you as well as they should, and myself too, because I like to hear about your childhood. I like to hear about your parents, your grandparents, and what put you on the path to where you ended up.
Okay, well, that's a lot of history.
Yeah. And you can give us, kind of an overview of it.
But of course, I grew up in the South, a small town called Enterprise, Alabama.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up on a farm, and I think that's where I really truly developed my work ethic, because my father owned property, and he would allow people to come and live on the property, and he helped people while doing that, and then once they were satisfied with themselves and they could farm or raise pigs or whatever the way he did, he would send them on his way, send them on their way. And so we watched that. There were many stories that my father used to tell us when he would, of course, be planting corn in the fields. He would say that, remember the seeds that you're planting and how you only put one in the ground, but in the autumn you would see a whole ear of corn.
Yes.
And he would give us those Christian principles that you reap what you sow.
There you go.
And
right.
so he showed us in concrete examples that whatever you do will reproduce itself many times more. And so I think those things, plus going to a school that was African American school, of course, during that time in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
They were segregated schools. So, of course, we had some of the best teachers to teach us. Of course, we had teachers coming from all over the country, and the teachers would live in the homes of the farmers and the people,
I've heard those
right, and they would live there. So you had a close connection with people who were highly educated, and your communities were never separated. You could go to church on Sunday and you would see the doctors, and you would see the lawyers, and you would see everybody. So we were just one community.
Right.
And so I think from that I developed a sense of real strong community that, of course, I carry with me today.
Right.
And when I think of my grandfather and my grandmother, she sold these little carts that you have on the street today.
Yeah.
She used that to sell what was called some hash sandwiches.
Hash sandwiches.
Yes,
all right.
it
We
was
see
chicken.
hash when I was a kid.
Right. It was chicken, I think mixed with turkey and
Uh-huh.
pork or something like that, that she had learned, that had been handed down to her. And she sold those sandwiches on the street until she and my grandfather built a church in the community.
Wow.
They were what you call Triumph Holiness people. And
I haven't heard of that one.
yeah, it was a holiness church, and they call it Triumph.
Triumph.
And Triumph Holiness
Yeah.
Church.
Okay.
And so they built that. I think that's something that probably came in from the islands, from my grandfather, some kind of denomination. But they built that church there in Enterprise. Now, I grew up in both churches because my grandfather was a very dominant person. He kept his sons really close.
Yeah.
And of course, my grandfather on my mother's side, they were strictly Baptist people. So my mother grew up a Baptist. My father was a Triumph Holiness. So I was between those two churches all the time.
Was your grandfather from the island?
Yes.
You know, which?
I think it's from Jamaica.
Jamaica.
Yeah,
okay.
right,
Okay.
right.
So you have some Jamaican roots.
Roots, right,
I have
right.
found in teaching, this is kind of a tangent a little bit, but I found that in studying the history of black business, that there are some significant differences between the African American psyche when it comes to business, and the orientation and the attitudes about business with people who come from the islands. And I understand the whole slavery issue, where you got off the boat and all that kind of thing.
Right, right.
But that's significant because that, I'm sure, has fed into your thinking all the way back to your grandfather.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Because to
what you
create a
watched him
business, right.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was done through them, but I was in a community, of course, that was segregated, and then black people came together in their churches to develop whatever businesses they needed. For an example, we built a hospital. I remember picking top cotton. Top cotton. We call it top cotton because all the cotton was gone on the plantations. And when all of that was done, you could go in anybody's plantation and pick whatever's left. Okay.
And it was on the top of the plant?
It was at the top of the plant, but it was what was left.
Okay.
And so they called it top cotton. So we would go out and pick that and get bundles and bundles of that, and we would sell it, and we would give it to the church because we were building a hospital in our town. So we built this hospital because, and it grew out of the fact that many black people were just dying. There's a room not this big actually, where the people would get shot on Saturday night or cut on Saturday night. They just go there and bleed to death, you know. And so the church people became, I remember how disturbed they were by all of this. And they all came together and decided we were going to do this. And we brought in an African doctor from Tuskegee to come down and run it.
Okay.
And so therefore, my sense of Africa, even at an early age, was very authentic.
Wow.
Because this person, Dr. Kibi was his name, and he was working in Tuskegee, and they loaned him down, and he started that hospital and ran that hospital. So that was the first black hospital in that particular area.
See, what you have just described, Cleaster, is collective work and responsibility.
Oh, right.
You have just described the laws of the harvest, as you described with the seed of corn, and those are the lessons that our children definitely need, and our adults need to have today. So that's an excellent.
That's what I passed on to my kids, by the way. In the school.
Yes.
I planted those same seeds in the students who passed through the school. Right.
That's great. Do you remember anyone beyond your grandparents?
No,
Okay.
I don't.
Okay.
No, I don't.
All right. Well, Enterprise, Alabama, I've been through there, been down there, been through there a couple of times. That's right. So that's interesting that you had that kind of childhood, and you saw these kinds of things, and you actually participated by picking the cotton and contributing to the building of a hospital.
Right.
The building of a hospital. And you talk about self-help and doing for ourselves and having our own entities and everything.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
But see, I don't know anything else.
Yeah.
See, because I grew up in an environment like that. And of course, when I arrived in Cincinnati, I was like the first black that was hired on a job here or a job there.
Yeah, yeah.
And so for about 30 years of my life, I was working in the white community until I started the Margaret Collins School in
Well, let's go back.
1990.
Let's go back to that. When you talked about your childhood and what, you went through high school there in Enterprise,
Yes,
Alabama?
right.
And then did you come to Cincinnati, or
Yes,
what
I came
happened
to
after high
Cincinnati.
school?
Yeah, I came to Cincinnati.
Start me there.
I came to Cincinnati. It was very interesting. I have an aunt living in Cincinnati. And even though you had 2 years of education, you couldn't find anything to do in Alabama but cook, clean, or scrub, or go back to the field.
Big cotton.
So that's right. So or shake peanuts or pick
Oh,
peanuts, either one. And so what happened? My aunt living here in Cincinnati, I came to live with her. Well, when I came here, of course, I already had 2 years of college. I had.
Now, where'd you go to college?
I went to Tuskegee the first 2 years.
Okay,
right,
good,
right,
good,
right.
right.
Okay, and then I moved here, and then of course I passed what they have, the what are those tests at City Hall? You take tests
Civil
for
service
civil
exam,
service,
yeah.
right? Civil service exams, and of course at that time, if you had not been in the city more than a year, you had to be in the city a year, before you could be considered for a civil
and what year
service
was
job. That was in 1953 or 4,
Okay,
right,
right.
53 or 4. And so what I did then, I couldn't get a job, so I took housekeeping job in Avondale. And I lived on the place right there on Burton Avenue. There were some wealthy Jews there.
Oh, yeah.
And so I worked with those people for about a year, and I was making $35 a week, but of course I didn't have to buy any food, I didn't have to do anything. So of course I had, took the $35, I saved 30 of the dollars, and lived on 5 of those dollars. And that was enough at that time to get my hair done and for me to go to church, which was at New Hope Baptist Church. I joined that church when I came here. And so that was my beginning in Cincinnati. But what I would do, this points to self-help. I knew I had sharp skills in terms of the language skills were okay. I knew that my shorthand would die if I didn't keep it up. I would lose it if I didn't practice it. So in the evening, when I was upstairs girl in Avondale, I would take do my shorthand from the news. I would take down word for word. I listened to it and I translate and do it, and then I would go upstairs in the evening and then I would translate it. So I kept my skills up that way, kept my typing skills up that way. And then finally I landed a job, I think it was in 1956, with the Cincinnati Public Schools in the business department on Iowa Street.
Okay.
And I worked there. Yeah, you were that operation.
Yeah, right.
And so, of course, I worked there until I got married. And once I got married and had my child, I stayed home. So while I was home during that period, I enrolled at Xavier University to finish my education.
Right, right.
And that's an interesting story. When I enrolled, it was an all-male school.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
Okay.
So what I did, I enrolled in the continuing education department and then went to school during the day. And all of my colleagues were